I think newer generations of leaders are more predisposed to care and wrestle with, like, am I making a difference? How am I impacting the world through my business, not just economically, but on humans? I think there's an increased care for that idea, even if it's ambiguous.
This is Lead with Culture. I'm Kate Volman, and I'm excited about this episode because I was joined by Mike Sharrow. He is the CEO of C12 Business Forums, which is the world's largest peer learning organization for Christian CEOs, business owners, and executives. He just got back from a big trip, so we dove right into the fascinating similarities and differences leaders encounter across the globe. We also explored employee development, company culture, and he shares some really great book recommendations and 2 habits that have made a massive impact on his life. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Kate, we've been looking forward to this for a while.
I know. I'm so excited. Before we dive into all of the fun conversation around culture and leadership development, can you share a little bit about C12 and your mission?
Our mission is pretty clear. It's to equip Christian CEOs and owners to build really great businesses and do it for a greater purpose. And we fulfill that by operating peer advisor groups around the world that are essentially like masterminds for Christian CEOs and business owners, but with professional facilitators that we call C12 Chair that are for growth stage companies. And we help people navigate, like, how do you grow a business? How do you grow people? And how do you have an eternal impact and really view your faith as central to that whole proposition? So I get to lead a small business of 30 folks that support a global network of coaches that then run those groups all over the world.
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. We talked about it the first time we chatted.
Yeah.
I was like, you have the best job.
When I'm not messing it up, it's a good job.
So, how many leaders are part of the organization?
We get served just shy of 4,300 people right now. And so from everything imaginable, from like small businesses to major multinational corporations in 8 countries. So just like incredible diversity of leaderships and industry settings.
Actually, we were just talking, you just got back from an incredible trip. Talk about international. I mean, really, you deal with leaders all over the world. So can you
Yeah.
share with everyone where you just came back from?
Yeah, I just got back from Asia, which is so crazy. So it's been around 30 years. I didn't found the business. I'm the third CEO. I was a member a long time ago is how I got involved. But about 6, 7 years ago, we'd never done anything outside the United States. We actually got founded in Florida, right near you. And the question was asked, like, is this going to work outside of an American context? And so long story short, we prayed, did some brainstorming, came with like a framework of how we think it might work internationally. And then literally said, God, you're going to have to bring someone to us because we didn't know how to find the right leader. What our rules was, we're not going to send Americans to go do this. Like, it's got to be indigenous leadership from those countries. And the next week, literally after we went, okay, God, if you want to do this, send us a leader. Someone reached out from Shanghai, China, and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And I was kind of thinking like Toronto, London. I was thinking like a little bit more easy countries. But fast forward, I just got back from visiting our markets in Taipei, Taiwan, Taichung, Taiwan, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur. We're all over Brazil, South Africa. We're launching Egypt and Ukraine. Like, it's crazy. But yeah, I got a chance to go visit our Asia Rim markets and just meet these leaders who are doing incredible stuff and leading in such different regulatory environments, cultural environments. Yeah, inspire me, challenge me. It's a lot of fun.
What have you noticed about the leadership? Like, what are the differences and similarities when you're having these conversations?
What's been surprisingly encouraging is on the similarity side is how much we're more alike than we're not. And so when you get
Mm.
past language and cultural accents and some of those pieces, at the end of the day, running a business is running a business. And so the pains and challenges of people and process and product and your own leadership shadows and all of those things are surprisingly the same. And that's been cool. I was at a meeting once where a CEO from China came was sitting in a Texas forum, and a physical therapy CEO was talking about his challenges running multiple clinics. And this guy runs a manufacturing company in China is like, man, I have no idea about being American, no idea about healthcare, but I know as a CEO, I wrestle with these issues, making those decisions, and the world has kind of got the same. So I think the similarities are encouraging there. The differences, I mean, like everything from like we're in a Muslim country where it's a federal crime to share your faith with a Muslim at work. You go to jail for 5 years, lose your business. That's kind of different than the US. Or Where in South Africa, where it's like 25% unemployment, 14% inflation rates, just economic environments are wildly different. But I think what inspires me most is Americans are, particularly Christian Americans who we deal with, like we're so affluent as a country and we're so safe. We get kind of comfortable and complacent in a forum where we may be like, hey, like we're gonna talk about culture today. Hey, God cares about your culture, cares about how you lead people. This is what God's word says. This is best practices in business. And a CEO in America might be like, that's interesting. That's cool. I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna pray about that. And maybe over the next couple months they'll implement some things. But like I was at a meeting in Taiwan and I'm literally sitting in the meeting. Well, this is very clear. Like this is good business principle. I hadn't thought about God caring about this. Well, I guess that means that I have to do something about this. So I guess by next month, I'll do this, this, and this. And it was just like action. I was like, are you going to think about it? And we're like, well, once you see what's true, like I should probably just do it. And so one of the things I love about non-US markets is there's generally a bit more hunger because business is not as easy. And there's a faster cycle time to actually like do something with truth.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Work enculturated to compromise. Like compromise is almost normal in America, and it's less normal in many international markets.
So give me an example when you say compromise of a leader here in the US. What are we compromising on?
Example, in Taiwan, we had a CEO, they're complaining about the country and the markets and the eroding middle class and blah, blah, blah. And then someone, well, okay, what are we going to do about it? And someone, well, hey, we had some content that they're going through on biblical compensation and benefits. And does God care about how you take care of your employees? And are we taking advantage of our employees? Are we creating kind of sustained poverty or versus being kind of the principle, don't muzzle the ox? The CEO went, my gosh, I guess I can't complain about our country lacking a middle class or about these systemic issues if I don't change it in my company. So the next month, he gave his employees a 30% raise across his company and allocated 15% of profits to a profit sharing pool. Like literally, everyone's like, what the heck are you doing? And then ironically, employees are like, where'd this come from? It's like, well, God has convicted me that the way I manage and take care of people is something I'm accountable for. And so I wanted to change it. He did that in 30 days. That would have been like a 6-month wrestling process in America. Or like in Brazil, we had a CEO who was like, oh, my business is a platform for helping people know the truth of the gospel. I guess next month I'm going to implement a program to help people do that. And literally in 30 days, he just did that. Whereas in the US, it'd be like, I'm going to start thinking about that, praying about that.
See, I find that so interesting, especially today, because in the US, well, what we've seen, because obviously we have a program that is around company culture and
Yeah.
employee engagement. So we see where more leaders are actually coming to us because they are intentional about searching for these kinds of programs, where I feel like years ago that wasn't really the case.
Yes.
You talk to so many leaders when they're coming to the table with their peers and having these conversations. How often is culture part of that conversation? Do they care about it? Are they thinking about it? Or are they really more focused on that product and profit side of the business?
Fortunately, a couple of things are converging. I think newer generations of leaders are more predisposed to care and wrestle with, like, am I making a difference? How am I impacting the world through my business, not just economically, but on humans? And so I think there's an increased care for that idea, even if it's ambiguous. And then I think the labor market's been fairly competitive for the last decade. And so I think the reality is you can't really compete unless you attract good talent, engage good talent. I think the challenge we found is some Indians don't know how to crack the nut. Like, what is it and how are they doing and what's the payoff areas? And so they can feel like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. We do a lot of emphasis around like, well, hey, it's hard to fix what you don't measure. So are you measuring not just employee engagement, productivity, and NPS and those things, but doing culture studies and really seeing where your gaps are, strengths are, and helping give them intelligent insight to that stuff. We also we only serve people of faith. And so it's pretty easy to connect the dots and say, hey, God cares about your work. You should be a good steward of your business. He cares about financial returns. But the most valuable asset in the world is humans. Don't sacrifice your impact on people just because you think you're just going to enable you to give a buck later. But let's really let our culture be one of the things that glorifies God and gives a testimony to our faith. That ideally, wouldn't it be something where even people who radically disagree with our faith love working for us because of the way we do culture? And so I think we attract people who are biased to that worldview. It's just a matter of kind of connecting the dots.
Yeah, I think we talked about that on our initial phone call. We serve such similar missions and work with such similar people. We're so in alignment that I'm like, "Oh, yeah, we fortunately, the people that come to us, they read the Dream Manager and they're like, "I get it, I understand it, I wanna do this." So, we're not trying to convince anyone that you should care about your people.
Yeah, if they don't care about
And
people, they wouldn't talk to you or me. Like we would not be their
exactly,
people.
for sure. When culture conversations come up, empowerment versus entitlement is definitely part of that conversation, right? Like,
Mhm.
how do you bring people into your organization? You care about the culture, creating a coaching culture that empowers your people to do their best work, but not creating an environment in which now your team members are feeling really entitled. So now you've kind of like gone a little too far. So, how do you share, or how is that conversation talked about with you and the leaders that you get to work with?
That's a constant tension to manage, we find. Christians can add additional traps to it. We use language of be careful of sloppy agape, where when you add this like Christian culture, like, hey, I'm a Christian, so I want everyone to feel love and be like, oh, that sounds great. So does love mean no accountability? Does it mean no consequences? If we're one big family, does that mean just everyone gets to stay no matter what? So that can lead to this entitlement softness. We're like, what? I don't think that's God honoring or good business. And so then you get the classic. So how do you do truth and grace? And so we try to regularly reinforce that culture should be about human dignity and believe that people are created in the image of God, so thus they should be loved and cared for who they are. But we're also all created to produce and to be productive and to be excellent. And so that accountability and performance, we're big fans of anything that creates ownership thinking throughout the organization. So pay for performance, incentive compensations, profit sharing, anything that helps connect everybody to the fact this is a team that's oriented around performance, not a club that everyone just gets to like exist because you're a member, and one that gives rewards. We live that the Bible has plenty of examples of God rewarding performance, rewarding risk, and that sowing and reaping is a biblical idea. So how do you create that in a culture that's a constant tension?
I like that, rewarding performance and risk. It reminds me of when you create a culture where people feel like they're supported by their leader and they know that they're able to make decisions. And if something doesn't go right, if you fail, if there's a project that you're not going to get fired, you're not going to get
Yeah,
reprimanded. It really just goes back to, hey, this is the culture we've created. We want to take risks. But you used one of my favorite words, accountability. We also are being held accountable to the work that we're doing.
yeah.
And it's just like so many things have to work together to create a great culture, and so I can only imagine the conversations around those tables with leaders every month.
And I'm one of them. Like I'm a member of one of our own groups. I pay dues to be part of a group in Austin, Texas. And I mean, I spent a lot of money this year on our annual culture study, and we brought in some org dev consultants to help us work through some team issues. And I think the thing that's frustrating about the culture topics, you're never done.
Yeah.
You're
So
never like,
true.
hey, we fixed it. We're done. We built it. Like it's constant dynamic, and you're adding people and shifting people and scaling, and you neglect stuff, or you we're doing something really well for a season, you take it for granted. So it's a bit of a whack-a-mole of constantly curating towards health.
I know. Oh my gosh. We have a webinar all about managerial courage. And one of the things we talk about with courage is you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's almost like you're in this constant state of transition in business, whether you're talking about culture. I mean, really every part of the business, right? Because as
Yeah.
you're growing, you're adding new things into the business, new people, new product, new services, new processes. It's ever evolving. And obviously, the people in your group, they're also constant learners. So you learn something new and it
Mhm.
becomes this aha moment. What do you think, Mike, is when you think about your peer to peer groups versus coaching? Like, how is a group like C12 different than having a one on one coach or a coaching relationship?
What we find helpful is any one coach can only leverage so much perspective and so much skill set. When you get a group of peers around you, you get a couple different components. You get folks who are shared context, but diverse context at the same time. So, like, I'm in a group with this one lady's running a film studio, another guy's running a cybersecurity business. This one lady runs a healthcare company. Like, they're all very different than mine, but we've all got people and scale and product issues. And so, when I'm wrestling with a culture issue, a customer issue, whatever, they're not saying, well, here's how to do it in your exact business, but they can both relate and say, well, here's how I've navigated that. Why wouldn't that work? And it's the peers help kind of get you out of your ruts and help you see things without your maybe industrial bias. But they also provide a bit of group accountability and group encouragement. And so we're all able to kind of build into each other, share with each other. No one's a guru. We're all kind of a table of peers. And that just creates a really fun environment to learn in, to contextualize in. It allows the coach to actually get to facilitate leveraging the collective horsepower of that and then go do coaching proper as kind of a complement. So I think the power of peer learning is, I always tell people, no matter what space you're in, industry, and like you should find peers that you're intentionally with. And then it just becomes a matter of how rigorous the structure of that is.
It's so interesting to be around a table of people who are also building something because they're really the only ones that can truly understand, and so many CEOs, they don't have that person to talk to. If you don't have a coach and if you don't have that kind of a peer-to-peer networking type community, then who do you talk to? You can't talk to your friends, you can't talk to your spouse because they don't really understand.
I'm texting with my group almost every day in some way. And then when we're meeting, like it's the one spot where you can get past imposter syndrome, be like, I don't know what the heck to do about this. I'm tired of this, or I'm frustrated about this. Or what's been frustrating me is I think all my ideas are great. They're just not all actually great, right? And so I presented numerous times to my group, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I sell myself on it, I sell them on it, and to go, no, I think that's gonna blow up in your face. Like, I think you're actually avoiding what you really should be dealing with, this issue over here. And we can just spar with no airs. We're not trying to press each other. It's not a networking group. When I joined 14 years ago as a member for the first time, I was like, I didn't even know how much I needed this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so of the time that you've been involved, first of all, can you imagine when you first joined, did you ever think you were gonna be the CEO?
No way. I would have laughed a lot.
So, of the time that you've been there,
Mhm.
what has surprised you the most? Actually, this is kind of like a two-part question. What has surprised you the most as being the CEO? And then also just being part of the group?
So initially, I overcomplicate. It's easy to overcomplicate business. It's I think you and I were talking this spring around like research we've been doing into our own product. And there's all these things. We got tools and technology, and we got systems and all those things. And we obsess on them, and they all matter. But then coming down to be like at the end of the day, what ultimately drives a CEO success in our model is just four things. It's camaraderie, accountability, the quality of food at the table, and the right number of people at the table. Like if those four things are right, crazy impact, crazy satisfaction. Doesn't matter how good or bad the rest of our features are. Doesn't mean we neglect those other things, but just the universal stuff of that's at the end of the day what really makes a difference in a leader's life. That has surprised me. And then it's just surprised me how much I have to keep growing as a leader leading the business. Like we can have great stuff going on, but I've screwed up our culture and team times, and I've had to like invest more in personal coaching and personal remediation and working through stuff more than I would have ever liked. So I think it's just the realization that whether CEO's running a $6 billion company or $6 million company, the fundamental leader issues are really not different, just different scale.
What do you mean you screwed up your culture? How'd you do that, Mike?
And you talked about doing a webinar like management courage. I think leadership required. There's a great book called Failure of Nerve. Highly recommend. I think whenever you get tired and just choose to not fight a battle, whenever you tolerate something until it becomes systemic and don't provide clarity. Like at one point, I was not being clear on the kind of culture I wanted to create, and so we got some culture survey studies back, and they were mixed. We did focus groups and had someone come in to look at like what does everyone want, and I realized that people were describing aspirations for our company culture that I didn't even like. And I was finding myself not liking the place I came to work at. It's like, well, if you don't like where you work and you're in charge, like that's kind of dumb. Henry Cloud says we are ridiculously in charge. You either have the culture you create or you tolerate. And so I literally had to have a family meeting and just unpack like, man, I want our culture to be about these things and these things. And this is what's important. And there was things I had felt and always judged in my head, but I had not articulated and not defined, codified, trained to, hired to. And so I was resenting the chaos that I was ultimately the only one who could shape. It was super frustrating to be a couple years in and being like, oh, and when I described the picture of reality, I had some team members who were like, "Oh, that's awesome. Let's go for that." A couple like, "Oh, now I get it." And a couple people like, "I don't like what you're describing. I don't want the culture you just painted." And I'd be like, "Oh, well, then probably need to help you find someplace else to work because this is where we're gonna go." Like, "Well, we didn't know that." Like, "That's on me."
The level of self-awareness that leaders have to have and being able to strip away ego, like being able to come to that conclusion, I think is really remarkable because so often, look, leadership is interesting. If you're leading a team, if you're building anything, you want to get it right. Like we want to get it right. It can be challenging for leaders to say, okay, I made a mistake. This is what we're going to do moving forward. And instead of kind of like wallowing in it. And so I think that's interesting for leaders to be able to kind of like take a look at themselves as a leader. So you said that one of the things that surprised you was just how much you have to continue to grow. How do you grow? How do you decide in what areas you want to gain the most skills so that you're able to kind of like have that self-awareness and be able to strip your ego as much as we can strip our egos when making decisions?
You definitely have to get a high, pain threshold for truth. You have to want to know the wake and shadow of consequences or things. Yeah, it's just constantly humbling. I think where I most fail is when if you get tired of that or afraid to find out what's underneath the rock, but you don't know, but you still pay the consequences of it. There's a leader that was really valuable that I knew had some rough edges, but I didn't know what to deal with because sometimes the cost of change and all that kind of stuff. And then we finally found out, well, that was trickling down and affecting teams they led more dramatically than I thought. So I thought I was just the one paying the price, but it's actually costing others. And so it's kind of hard to not, or it's impossible, I think, to create a healthy culture if you're not going to just have a high tolerance for truth and feedback and data and learning loops.
A high pain threshold for truth. I love that. What advice would you give to someone who's listening who is working on their business? They've kind of been stagnant for a couple years. You know how we can get complacent? Things are
Yeah.
okay, they're moving along, they're not really growing. And like what advice would you give to someone?
I used to have these little T-shirts made called "No" with the word pond scum and a little like X across it, like "No pond scum." So I live in Texas right now. It's not where I grew up. It's where I've been for a while. And if you go to the eastern part of Texas towards Louisiana, there's a lot of like bayous and lowland water. And if you've ever been a place like that where the water's just really still, it smells bad. Like there's funky stuff, there's algae. It gets kind of nasty in this still water spots because water, like it needs to have some level of agitation to keep it healthy and keep it growing. Then you go to a river or you go to a lake and it looks great. I think organizations and leaders are the same way. Like if we get too stagnant, you just grow funky stuff. And so you need something that's going to agitate the waters with assessments and paradigms. And like we use a version of the balanced scorecard and we call it the 5-point alignment matrix to really say every leader should be constantly assessing like, how's your business performing in organizational issues? Do you know? Are you measuring it? What's best practice? How do you benchmark on that? Sales, marketing, ops, finance. What's ministry look like in a business? And when you get into a cadence of like constantly assessing and looking at and having a way of figuring out where's truth, what's best practice, where's your business at, that will draw you into like a cross training regimen. Then it's put you on a journey of constantly getting better. You may not always be getting bigger. Like not every business is supposed to be $100 million company and take over the world, but you should always be getting better. We're wired to want that. We just don't naturally do that unless you put yourself in a gym, get yourself a coach, figure out something that helps you get feedback and actually see reality.
I love that you said we don't have to get bigger, but always be getting better because I do think that we do live in this culture where it seems there's a lot of, especially online, there's a lot of people talking about you have to make more, earn more, be more, have billions of dollars, like be a billionaire. Like it's all about more, more, more. When really so many people, their lives can become so much more fulfilling through less but better, like continuing to get better. So I love that you made that distinction because I think a lot of businesses, we need to be very clear of who are we and who are we trying to be. I think we get advice from people who are building $1 billion business. But if that's not what you want, then maybe look for other people to talk to about where you want to go and ways in which to do that.
We did some content this summer around like how big is big enough. And it's this tension, like we're all about growth, but growth can look different ways. So sometimes it is like gaining in scale, but sometimes it's improving employee engagement, improving margins, improving quality and excellence, net promoter scores. Like it's optimizing and getting excellent. And that may afford growth in volume, but maybe it's actually just being like the best world-class $4 million roofing company in a small town. And so like not letting hubris and kind of a worldly pride hijack your definition of success.
I mean, we talk to people that are similar in the sense I know that the leaders we work with, they have a lot of pride in not only getting better, but it's not always about growth, but they love the fact that they are getting best places to work.
Mhm,
Their people in their community want to come work for them because they have such a great reputation around having a wonderful culture.
mhm,
And those things are really meaningful because we work a lot of our lives. We
mhm.
spend a lot of time at the office. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. Well, I would love for people to really understand maybe if there's one or two examples you can share of a C12 member that kind of stands out, something that they were going through, and that because they're part of this peer to peer networking group, they really were able to get through and had some remarkable results on the other side.
So obviously we all survived the same crisis of the pandemic a few years ago, and in different kinds of businesses that was more of an existential threat than others. And had a member who was running a interior design construction company. And when it became illegal to go to workplaces or sites and jobs all shut down, hundreds of employees looking at how to do layoffs, what's going to happen here. And the invitation of the peers was like, okay, now's the time to invest in your people more than ever. Like, how do you lean in and address their anxiety, their stress? How do you have open conversations? How do you support them and care for them? And how do you invite them to be part of the process? And so, in general, the members we served kind of rallied through that time and were like 60% less likely to do layoffs or cutbacks in those first 4 months of the pandemic. And as a result, what happened was like, hey, you created this incredible like loyalty and fidelity, and we're all like galvanized together. As the market began to open back up, you actually had higher engaged teams all working together. Like, how do we solve this? How do we create value? How do we innovate together? And actually then grew faster in the recovery cycle than otherwise. Whereas if you like just shed your people and just kind of protect your balance sheet real quick, then you're figuring like how to hire people, how to train people, how to get capacity, and you kind of miss the recovery wave. And and so the counsel there on like playing the long game and not letting chaos kind of stupefy you. Don't let the stupor of the moment overwhelm you. Lots of really cool outcomes there. I mean, I was a beneficiary. So back to the whole ideas are great until they're not. I went to present every year in our rhythm. You present us like a strategic plan to your forum. You actually do this big group analysis of your company and provide all this data. As I was presenting to my group my plan to go launch New York City, really cool plan, all the big language. I had all my justification. Everyone's like, wow, that's really cool. And this one lady in my group who was like the newest member of the group, and she asked about a couple of domestic markets nearby. And she's like, how's that market doing? And how's that market? I'm like, well, we're already there. We're doing okay. She's like, yeah, but are you doing great in those markets? I was like, doing so-so. And she's like, well, why are you launching New York? I was like, well, because the most influential city in the world and huge and yada, yada. And then she went, well, what if it's just pride and hubris because it's cooler and sexier to say you're launching New York than it is to go fix two markets nearby that are just mediocre? Like if you're to put the same energy and cost into fixing an existing market, would you get a better return on your mission than you would chasing New York? And she's like, I would just challenge you. Is it pride or is it really strategic? And in the moment, I was like, how dare you? Like that's questioning my motive. Like that's, of course, it's mission and Jesus and New York. And it's like, okay, it just sounds like it could be hubris. And I drove home that day, really ticked off at her. But then something unraveled where I was like, if I was to spend that much time and energy on existing market improvement, would I actually grow the business better? And she was right. And so we literally pivoted our strategic plan over the next 3 years, went all in on growing existing markets, getting critical mass, overcoming growth barriers there. And it totally changed our business. So, I mean, that's like, I'm a beneficiary of our process.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That is so awesome. I think everyone needs that person that they can call when you want to get truth. Like, I have people that I'll call that I know they're going to be like, that's great. Go for it. It's perfect. And I know the
Mhm.
people in my phone that'll be like, challenge me down to the core. I'm going to
Yep.
hate it. But those are the people that I need to call.
That's right.
Wow. That's crazy. And this is why I love coaching and what you guys are doing with the masterminds, because it really is only a third party person can ask you that kind of that question,
Totally.
because your team is all in too, because it does sound cool. Oh, we're launching in New York. Like, that is really, oh my God. It reminds me of this quote. I've been saying this quote. I need to learn how to pronounce her name because I'm probably saying it wrong, but it's deep in Parmer. And it says, the magic you are looking for is in the work you're avoiding. That is the hard truth that we need to hear. All right, Mike, a lot of our listeners, they are totally on board the fact that you're always growing, learning, developing. What are you doing? What are you reading? What books do you have? Any great books that you've read over the past few years, or is there a book that you recommend most often to people?
I'm rereading right now the book Failure of Nerve. It's an interesting look at systemic leadership issues in your business, your family, your city, your country, and just in a age where everything's kind of caught up in accommodation and don't make waves and how to try to make everyone happy. It talks like that failure of nerve is actually part of the cancer of any organization. So that book's really, really great. But you know, talking about high tolerance for truth and feedback. I read a book last year a friend recommended called Leadership Pain by Sam Chans. It was just really good. It was just a candid kind of like, yeah, leadership is hard. So deal with it. If you can't handle ankle biting issues at a team of 10, you're not going to do very well. And you've got a team of 100 or a team of 1,000 because those things just scale with you. That book was a good kind of like, it's just hard to get over it. I'm rereading reread The Advantage with my team this year. And I'm just trying to continue to work on organizational health and clarity stuff.
And The Dream Manager, of course.
And The Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly. We were just going through some content creation exercise literally yesterday with my team for some stuff we're doing at the beginning of the year. And we're trying to figure out scorecards because we every business needs to look at measuring success in 3 different areas. Are you a steward of economic capital, human capital, and spiritual capital? So essentially, are you growing the business in value? Are you growing people in value? Are you making a kingdom impact to your business? And one of our chairs was like, well, can we just put on the assessment, do you have a dream manager program? Can that be like a standard question? I was like, well, I think Kate would love it if we made that the question, but are we
Yes, I would love that.
like, is that the universal question? But it's like, but it's such a great way to like, what's going to make sure you're growing people?
Oh, I love that. All right. And then what is one habit that has made an impact in your life when it comes to your growth, development, and your leadership that our listeners might want to incorporate into their day?
A daily and a weekly thing that actually the founder of C12 challenged me on in 2 areas that I would have always thought I would have said I did, but I didn't really do until entering this role was one, having a non-negotiable personal quiet time every morning where I get up earlier to make sure I've got time to read the Bible, pray, journal, and literally reflect and process the coming day and what it's got to do in my life. And not just like a touch and go or like a little drive-by devotion of like actually spending time with the actual owner of the business and talking about those things. And then a weekly rhythm that I didn't start doing until about 7 years ago. And it's been a surprisingly hard and surprisingly fruitful has been to actually have a Sabbath, which is, an old Jewish idea. Not just having like, hey, a day we go to church. But like for me, I actually follow kind of the Jewish rhythm of it, like Friday night dinner to Saturday night dinner, where I don't do any email. I don't talk to people at work. I don't deal with work issues. Like I'm truly like I'm resting and I'm actually trusting that God runs the world, not me. I've always said like, yeah, I went to church on Sunday and that's my Sabbath, but it wasn't restful and it wasn't like the fullness of that idea. And sustaining that even through COVID, through crisis times, through firestorms has been really good to make sure I don't have a false messiah complex, like that I'm the whole one holding everything all together.
Interesting. I love that. I know it's hard for a lot of people to take that time. There's always more to do, always more to think about, always more to
Yeah.
work on.
I take vacations and things like that, but that's different. This is
Yes.
like a weekly, just no matter what,
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us and providing all this value. And for people that want to get involved with C12, which is an amazing organization, and I'm so excited because they're actually opening up a chapter here in
Finally.
West Palm Beach soon. I know, I'm so excited about it. So it's going to be awesome. But where can people connect with you and find out more about C12?
Yeah, if you go to joinc12.com, you should be able to search and find like if there's one near you. We're in about 160, 170 cities, but there's still places we're trying to get to. So trying to get to Miami for a while. But yeah, if you go to joinc12.com, they can find local groups. They can go to our YouTube channel and find a bunch of free case studies and a bunch of content around how we do what we do. But finding a group, that's the best way.
Yeah, and definitely go on the website because you guys have a beautiful journal. You have a lot of really great
Planning
content.
guides, and yeah, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great resources for leaders. And also, if people are interested in potentially being part of the group and then maybe running the group, I mean, hey, you just never know who you're going to meet or when you join this kind of
That's
group, the
right.
impact it's going to have on your organization and, of course, in your life. Mike, thank you so much. You were awesome. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Likewise, Kate, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got at least one idea that you will use to help move your business forward. That is the whole point of this podcast is we want to give you resources and ideas. And that's why I love talking to leaders like Mike, because these conversations, he shared some really great stories. And he also shared some of the challenges that he's seeing, some of the mistakes that he's made. And that's how we all learn and grow together, which is why he is such a wonderful leader to lead this organization of peer learning, because he's in it. He's in it every single day, building a team, growing a team, and also supporting others doing the same. And so I hope that you enjoyed this episode, got something out of it that you're going to actually use to grow your team and to grow your business. If you are curious at all about coaching, I really appreciated that Mike said, peer learning is really wonderful and having those mastermind groups is amazing. I think it's really wonderful to be able to sit down with people and you get to talk through all of these ideas and what you're doing to grow your business. And then also one-on-one coaching. There's nothing like sitting with a coach every month, sharing what you're doing, sharing what you're seeing and experiencing, and then they come back with you with those hard-hitting questions, those questions that will get the truth, right? Get to the truth. I love that he shared we have to have a high pain threshold for truth. And in order to do that, coaching should be involved. It's a really awesome opportunity for you to really become the best version of yourself. So if you're interested in one-on-one coaching and discovering what that might look like for you, then we would love to have a conversation. You can go to floydcoaching.com, check that out, and hopefully we can serve you in a really powerful way. Thank you again for listening. We appreciate you. And until next time, lead with culture.